Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the warm, velvety dusk of a West African village, barefoot and wide-eyed. The air smells like earth and fire, and the last streaks of sunlight melt behind tall baobab trees. You walk slowly, following the soft thump of a wooden mortar and the quiet hum of women chatting while they stir something thick and mysterious. There's a bubbling sound up ahead, and no, it's not stew. It's a large clay vat, steaming gently in the evening air, filled not with soup, but with something far more powerful. Indigo dye. The world around you glows with that telltale bluish tint. From head wraps to faded tunics fluttering on clotheslines like sleepy flags. You've just stumbled into a centuries-old tradition, one born long before the word synthetic was ever uttered. Oh, and here's your survival warning. This process involves fermentation, weird plant chemistry, and some pretty pungent smells. So yeah, you probably won't survive this, without at least crinkling your nose a few times. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're retuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step off the beaten path and feel the ground change beneath your feet. No gravel, no pavement, just warm, packed earth that has seen centuries of foot traffic. The village around you doesn't feel old in a crumbling way. It feels alive in a way that hasn't changed because it hasn't needed to. There's no ticking clock, no glowing screens. Yet somehow, you're exactly on time. The indigo vat is ready, has been brewing for days, maybe even weeks. The mixture inside it is alive, literally. And just like sourdough starter or kombucha back home, this dye has a personality. A woman stands beside the vat, stirring it slowly with a stick that looks more ceremonial than practical. She doesn't check her watch, she checks the smell. The scent is sharp, a little barnyard, with a faint hint of something metallic and ancient. You'd expect something this magical to smell like roses or lavender, but indigo dye doesn't care about your expectations. There's a small crowd gathered nearby. Not tourists, not spectators. They're neighbors, family, other dyers. Some have cloth draped over their arms, strips of creamy, uncolored cotton. Others just stand and wait. No one rushes. No one asks, how long? Because time here isn't measured in minutes. It's measured in readiness. The indigo vat gurgles slightly, and the dye master finally gives a single nod. It's ready. You approach a woman kneeling beside a woven basket. She unrolls a piece of cloth and dips it carefully into the vat. She holds it underwater for just a moment, then pulls it out. And here's where the magic really begins. It's green, not blue, not even close. A soft, pale seaweed green that starts to shift before your eyes. It's reacting to the air, oxidizing. The cloth shimmers slightly as it catches the fading light, and then slowly, so slowly you see it happen. The green deepens into turquoise, then into blue, and then into that unmistakable rich indigo hue. No paintbrush needed, no digital color wheel, just chemistry, air, and time. This process, the dip, the wait, the change is repeated again and again. Each round deepens the blue, like layering shadows. Some cloths will be dipped 3 times, others up to 15. You watch as the dyers move with muscle memory, knowing exactly how long to wait, exactly when to wring out the fabric and when to return it to the vat. There's no timer, it's just a knowing. Historians still argue whether West African dyers were using fermented indigo vats as early as 1000 CE, or whether those techniques emerged later through trade and adaptation. What is certain, though, is that this isn't borrowed knowledge. It's rooted, indigenous, passed down through song, through rhythm, through generations who learned by watching hands, not reading books. The dye master wipes her hands on her skirt, leaving blue streaks like war paint. She notices you staring, smiles softly, and gestures for you to come closer. Wants to show you something. She holds up a strip of cloth that looks almost plain, just dyed blue, no pattern. But as she turns it in the firelight, faint shapes shimmer across the surface. Delicate diamonds, curved lines, dots that dance like constellations. You squint. She chuckles. That's the thing with indigo, it's not just a color, it's a language. You learn that the dye doesn't go on top of the cloth. Sinks in, binds with it on a molecular level. That means it lasts. No cracking, no flaking. A properly dyed indigo cloth can survive generations, outlasting owners, wars, even colonization. A quirky tidbit: some of these vats are fed like pets. Dyers will add mashed bananas, palm wine, or even old porridge to keep the bacteria happy. Yes, the dye has dietary preferences. No, you don't want to share a fridge with it. The village dogs pad by, uninterested. To them, blue cloth is nothing new. But to you, every dip, every turn, every shimmer feels quietly sacred. You sit down on a low wooden stool someone offers you. It creaks a bit under your weight, but you're grateful. The air has cooled now, and the fire beneath the vat crackles gently. Somewhere in the distance, a baby cries, a rooster crows for no reason, and the stars slowly begin to show their faces. No clocks, no rush. Just this: blue cloth, firelight, and the slow, ancient pulse of a world that measures time in dips and hues. You wake up the next morning, not from sleep, but from a kind of reverie. Your bones haven't moved in hours, and your hands still smell faintly like smoke and leaves. The dye vat has gone quiet for now, its bubbling soothed by the coolness of dawn. But before anything turns blue, something else must come first: the cloth. You stretch and follow the low sound of a spindle spinning somewhere near the edge of the village. The path is narrow, shaded by banana trees, and leads you to a clearing where a few women are already hard at work. And by work, we're talking about the kind of labor that makes gym workouts look like nap time. One woman barefoot, her back straight, pulls cotton from a fluffy pile beside her. It looks like someone exploded a cloud. She rolls the fibers between her fingers with a motion so practiced it could be dance. She spins the fluff into thread using a weighted spindle that dangles from her hand. You watch the thread grow longer, thinner, tighter, and realize this cloth starts here, in a dance between fingers and gravity. The cotton they use doesn't come from a store, obviously. It's grown in nearby fields, planted and picked by hand. You blink at the sun rising over those same fields now, golden light pouring down over the pale cotton bolls like powdered sugar on warm bread. It's beautiful, sure, but also kind of a pain to harvest. Cotton plants are scratchy little brutes. It's no surprise, then, that the harvesters wear long sleeves even in this heat. Sunburn is one thing, shredded forearms are quite another, and guess what? Long before dye ever kissed this fabric, these women were already experts. Picking the right time to harvest, separating seeds from fiber, prepping it for spinning, it's all part of a system you weren't even aware existed. No blue dye yet, but the art's already in full motion. Historians agree that West Africa had highly specialized textile communities dating back over 1,000 years, woven into robes, turbans, and even mummy wrappings, because nothing says eternal rest like a well-spun cotton shroud. Fringe researchers suggest that the vibrations of the song may have helped in keeping the cotton fibers from knotting. Others say it was just a way to pass the time or ward off bad spirits with melody. A younger girl nearby gestures for you to try spinning. Sit down gingerly, afraid you'll snap the spindle or embarrass yourself completely. And the older women smile kindly without laughing out loud. Progress. Once the threads are spun, they're wound into skeins and boiled in ash water, an early form of soap. This deguming process strips away natural oils so the dye can penetrate deeply later. Now comes weaving. You head back, toward the village center, where men work at wide horizontal looms, and women often handle smaller vertical looms. Some looms creak like old ships, some whisper softly with the rhythm of the work, but all move to the beat of practiced hands and silent concentration. This isn't just making fabric, it's making time visible. You lean in close and notice imperfections, tiny skips, slight warps. Not a factory, not an algorithm. A person, breathing and sweating, and occasionally sneezing right onto the warp threads. And speaking of sneeze-level trivia, you know that some looms were built to squeak on purpose? Kind of alert system. You know, the usual. By midday, the finished fabric strips are hung in loops under a thatch awning, fluttering slightly in the breeze. They're cream-colored, plain, almost bashful, waiting. They've come a long way, from prickly cotton bowls to buttery soft cloth, and they're about to meet their destiny. You brush your hand along the edge of one strip, and it feels warm from the sun, but soft like worn pajamas. It's light, breathable, perfect for desert heat or village life or epic ceremonial dance battles. We sit down for a break with the weavers. Someone offers you a small bowl of roasted groundnuts and something cold to drink. The cup is carved from a gourd, and the drink tastes faintly sour, maybe tamarind, maybe sorcery. Either way, it's refreshing. The weavers speak softly among themselves, pointing at their cloth like proud parents. You catch only fragments, but the pride is unmistakable. And now you understand why. Because before any cloth is dyed, before any pattern is tied, someone had to coax a plant into thread, and a thread into fabric, and they did it all without a clock. You find yourself wandering toward the outer edge of the village, led not by anyone's directions, but by the unmistakable smell of something green and freshly crushed herbal, a little sharp, a little earthy. It's not unpleasant, but it definitely doesn't scream perfume counter. The path curls toward a small grove, where the underbrush thickens and leaves grow large enough to shade your entire arm. Here's where the real stars of the indigo process live. The plants, they don't glow, they don't sing, they don't look particularly magical. In fact, they look kind of like your aunt's houseplants, assuming little shrubs with oval-shaped leaves. You'd walk right past them if you didn't know better. But these are indigo-bearing plants, and they hold within their modest greenery a deep, brilliant blue that, oddly enough, doesn't show up until you beat the life out of them and drown them in a vat of their own juices. Lovely, right? You crouch beside a woman who's holding a machete knot in a threatening way. Don't worry, end. Carefully trimming the top leaves off a plant, she doesn't cut the whole thing, just the best, most tender bits. These are what contain the highest concentrations of indican, the compound that eventually becomes indigo dye. It's plant chemistry 101. The greener the leaf, the more potential for blue, even though you can't see it yet. You join in, tentatively pinching leaves from a nearby shrub. It's slow work, and the sun has started to climb overhead, filtering through the leaves in golden rays. You can hear insects buzzing lazily, and somewhere nearby, someone's playing a calabash drum, the beat bouncing like heartbeat against your ribs. There are many species used for indigo, and depending on the region, the plant might be Indigofera tinctoria, Lonchocarpus, cyanescens, or even Strobilanthes cousia in other parts of the world. In West Africa, particularly in places like Nigeria, it's often the Lonchocarpus variety, called ilu or gara in some local languages. But here's the wild part. These plants aren't obviously blue, not even close. Magic is locked inside, and like a moody teenager's emotions, deeply buried and only revealed under very specific dramatic conditions. Historians still argue whether African communities independently discovered indigo dyeing, or if it spread from earlier cultures in India or Egypt via trade. What's not in doubt is that African artisans perfected their own system's custom vats, specific plant blends, and fermentation rituals that make Western tie-dye look like finger painting. Once enough leaves are harvested, they're packed into baskets and carried balanced gracefully on heads, of course back toward the dyeing compound. There the real fun begins. You walk into a courtyard surrounded by low mud brick walls, where a wide clay vat sits sunken into the ground like a hot tub for ghosts. It's empty for now, but not for long. The women begin crushing the leaves. Some use stones, others use their bare hands. It's rhythmic, a sort of leafy massage that releases the inner liquids. Water is added, not boiling, just warm, and the entire leafy mess begins to steep. It looks like green tea for giants. The mixture will sit like this for hours, even days, depending on the ambient heat and humidity. No one's checking the time. No digital thermometer is beeping its way to doneness. They know how long by the smell, the texture, and how the surface of the mixture starts to shimmer with a faint iridescence, like oil on water or dragonfly wings. Now here's a quirky little secret. In some villages, they throw in a few special ingredients to wake up the dye. Things like wood ash, stale millet beer, even goat urine. Each one adds alkali or nitrogen, helping kickstart the fermentation process. You can almost hear the vat belch contentedly as the mixture turns from bright green to a deep, murky swamp color. That's when you know the transformation has begun. One of the women tells you, half laughing, that if the dye doesn't stink a little, it won't stain a lot. And she's right. As fermentation sets in, the scent sharpens. It's not exactly gross, but it's definitely strong. Think barnyard meets compost heap with a twist of week-old salad. You back away slightly and pretend to admire the nearby chickens. But here's where things get even more fascinating. Once the plant matter is removed, what's left behind is the indigo soup. dark. It's metallic-looking liquid that doesn't look blue at all. It's yellow-greenish and a bit oily. The blue only appears when oxygen hits it. More on that later. For now, you just marvel at the fact that all this came from leaves you nearly stepped on this morning. Someone leans over the vat, stirs slowly with a paddle, and murmurs something you can't quite catch. A blessing? A recipe? It's maybe both. This part of the process isn't just science, it's ritual. The dye vat is treated like a living being, temperamental, moody, occasionally spiteful if ignored. If the pH balance is wrong or the weather too cold, it might refuse to work altogether. You respect its mood. And now, a tiny nugget from the edges of historical rumor. In some places, dye masters were believed to have spiritual connections to their vats. People whispered that they could tell the future by how the bubbles formed or by the shape of the surface scum. Was it superstition? Probably. Was it kind of awesome? Definitely. You don't get that with industrial dye tanks. You sit on a low stool again, watching the bubbling surface. And it dawns on you how much of this craft is invisible to the modern eye. No one taught it in your school. No diagrams on glossy paper. Just generations of hands remembering what works. One of the women plucks a tiny leaf from her headscarf and tosses it into the vat, then watches it sink. She doesn't explain why. Maybe it's tradition. Maybe it's a test. Maybe it's just something her grandmother always did. You don't need to understand it all. Not yet. All you need to know is that the color blue deep rich. World-shifting blue is in there, waiting, breathing, fermenting slowly under a sun that doesn't care what time it is. You come back the next day, and the vat is alive. Not like monster movie alive, don't worry, but breathing in its own slow, ancient way. The surface quivers when stirred, forming delicate bubbles edged with a purplish sheen. A smell like overripe vegetables and iron clings to the air, thick enough to taste. It's the smell of chemistry and culture colliding in a clay pot the size of a small bathtub. And you, lucky traveler, are about to witness the moment indigo dye truly reveals itself. But not so fast. First comes the cloth prep. You sit with the women again, now inside a shaded courtyard where lengths of cotton strips are being folded, twisted, bound with raffia, stitched with tiny, tight pleats. Their fingers move with expert precision, working faster than you could even think. Some patterns require days of work before dyeing even begins. Welcome to the ancient art of resist dyeing. This is where things start to look magical. Think of it as fabric origami meets sacred geometry. Patterns are created by resisting the dye in specific areas. Wherever the cloth is compressed or blocked, the dye can't seep through. That's what creates those crisp white lines. Delicate stars, spirals, diamonds, and animal shapes once the cloth is finally unfolded. Some use intricate stitchwork clong threads sewn into the fabric and then pulled tight to create gathered ridges. Others fold the cloth in accordion pleats, then bind it into thick packets with raffia or rope. A few artisans use wooden blocks or small seeds rolled into the cloth and tied like little dumplings. You can't help but notice how personal it feels. No two pieces are exactly alike. This is customization before bespoke was a buzzword. Historians have traced resist dyeing in West Africa back hundreds of years, particularly among the Yoruba, Hausa, and Fulani peoples. In Nigeria, the Yoruba art of a dye or meaning tie and dye flourished in the city of Abeokuta by the 19th century. There, women developed countless methods for creating breathtakingly detailed cloth using raffia ties, feather quill tools for wax resist, and folding techniques that make your brain ache just watching them. But here's the kicker. Nobody had a watch. No one was setting a timer or checking a thermometer. The cloth soaks until it's ready. The knots are tied as tightly as your grandmother's rules. The dyeing begins when the vat is in a good mood. You'd think it was vague, but it works. Because centuries of practice have honed a deeper instinct, one you're just beginning to glimpse. As you handle one piece of bound cloth, it feels like a secret, like something you're not supposed to unwrap too soon. A woman next to you grins, showing white teeth stained faintly with kola nut, and nods toward the vat. It's time, as they move with purpose now. The cloth is lowered carefully into the liquid, submerged fully beneath the surface. A paddle presses it down, then lifts it slowly. At first, the fabric looks pale yellow, almost green. You blink, confused. Then oxygen hits it. Within seconds, the cloth starts to change. The greenish tint deepens, turns bluish, then bluer still. You can actually watch it transform, as though the cloth is breathing in color. It's not subtle, it's a gasp. And just like that, the color appears. Real, true indigo. Dark as ocean depths. Deep as nightfall in the desert. You stare at the strip of cloth like it just performed a magic trick. Here's what's really happening, in case your high school chemistry teacher is listening. Inside the vat, the dye is in a reduced state, soluble, but not yet blue. Once exposed to air, the oxygen causes oxidation, transforming the compound into insoluble indigo pigment that adheres permanently to the fibers. Ta-da, blue. The cloth goes in and out of the vat several times, each dip layering color like coats of paint. More dips equals deeper blue. It's not fast, and it's not easy. Your arms ache just watching. But the process is mesmerizing. Dip, press, pull, unfurl. Watch it turn from swampy green to kingly blue. Repeat. And now for a truly bizarre side note. In some communities, a piece of cloth that refused to take the dye was considered cursed or possessed. People believed the cloth itself was rejecting the indigo spirit. Some even burned it in purification fires. Historians still debate whether this belief emerged from repeated chemical failures, or if it was a metaphor for spiritual disharmony. One elder sits beside the vat, watching the cloth change color like a priest observing a sacrament. He doesn't say much, just nods occasionally, as if giving his blessing. The dye vat, after all, is sacred. It's not uncommon for dyeing spaces to be protected by ritual, even taboos. Some areas forbid men entirely. Some require that you speak certain blessings before dipping. The color blue didn't come easy, it had to be earned. Cloth is hung on wooden racks to dry, fluttering in slow motion in the late afternoon heat. The indigo deepens as it dries, becoming velvet soft to the eye. No shine, just richness. Blue that swallows light instead of bouncing it back. You sit on the ground, your back against a clay wall, watching the fabric sway. It almost looks alive, like it's whispering something. You half expect it to sigh. And you realize something quietly staggering. This blue traveled continents. It once wrapped emperors, mystics, brides, and warriors. European traders called it blue gold for a reason, because it was valuable, rare, and profoundly difficult to create. And here you are, watching it emerge from leaves and water and fire and time. No clock, no rush, just mastery. As evening begins to settle, a few women lay their finished cloths over their arms and smile. Some of it will be worn at festivals, some will be sold in the market. A few pieces, those especially flawless or symbolic, will be saved for weddings, naming ceremonies, or even burial rites. You don't need to know the names of the patterns to feel their power. They speak in contrast and curve, in shadow and light. And in this moment, with the sun dipping low and the vats resting after a long day, you understand that blue isn't just a color here. It's a story. You wake with the morning mist still clinging to the trees, cool and quiet, except for the occasional bleat of a goat and the gentle rattle of palm fronds in the breeze. The dyeing compound is already stirring. Cloth from the previous day flutters like flags, crisp, dry, deep blue hanging from poles stretched between wooden posts. It's oddly peaceful, watching them sway like a slow-motion ceremony just for you. But today, something different is happening. A low hum builds across the courtyard, women murmuring. Feet brushing earth, a rising rhythm tapping from fingers and pestles. There's a buzz in the air, like the moment just before rain or revelation. This morning it's not about cloth, it's about symbols. You sit beside an older woman, her hair wound tightly in coils, and she holds out a folded piece of indigo fabric. At first glance it's just beautiful, sure, but then you start to see something deeper. Shapes, meanings, a whole visual language, stitched into the folds. These are not random patterns, they're codes. Among the Yoruba, for example, each Adire motif has a name, a story, sometimes even a proverb behind it. One pattern might resemble a fishbone. It's called J, and it symbolizes abundance or adaptability. Another features interlocking circles, meaning continuity. There's Alakan, named after the sea deity, and it carries layers of meaning: wealth, mystery, and the deep feminine. You're not just wearing a color, you're wearing a sentence, a statement, a spell. And here is something wild. Some of the best-known indigo motifs across African traditions were once used as communication tools. During the transatlantic slave trade, it's believed that certain designs embedded in cloth carried secret meanings between women, resistance, escape, longing. It's one of those claims historians still argue over, unsure whether it's poetic myth or encoded memory. But either way, the idea has power. You run your finger across a stitched spiral and wonder what truths it once held. You're invited to try your hand at a motif. A simple one, they promise. Someone hands you a strip of soft white cloth and a small calabash bowl of melted beeswax. A sharpened chicken feather rests inside a tool known as a kiki. Wax resist is a delicate art. You dip the feather and drag it gently over the fabric. Trying to draw a flower but ending up with something that looks like a startled spider. The woman beside you snorts softly. "It's a spirit spider," she says. Very powerful. She's clearly being polite. Once the wax dries, the cloth will be dipped into the dye vat just like the tied pieces. The waxed areas resist the indigo, creating creamy white lines once it's removed. It's laborious, fussy work, and somehow still meditative. It's like writing with your hands instead of your voice. Another woman shows you a folded square of fabric, the design already complete. Thick dots arranged in diamond shapes, each perfectly spaced. She tells you the name of the pattern is oloso, meaning the talkative one. "Cloth that tells stories," she says, grinning like you. You feel slightly called out, but also flattered. This use of visual storytelling isn't unique to Yoruba culture. Across the continent, indigo motifs carry deep cultural resonance. In Mali, the Dogon people use dyed cloth not just for beauty, but for spiritual ceremony. In Ghana, among the Awe and Ashanti, Adinkra symbols, each with its own proverb, were sometimes stamped onto cloth with natural dyes, including indigo blends. The practice of assigning moral, social, or political meanings to fabric is as old as weaving itself. And here's a quirky side note. In some West African markets, certain patterns were believed to bring good luck when worn on specific days. A cloth with the Ebru motif might be worn to ward off bad spirits on a Thursday, while Ife patterns were better saved for weddings or visits to your crush's family. No pressure. You notice that no one wears their indigo casually. There's always a reason, a mood, a message. Whether it's a funeral wrap or a celebration gown, the color, the pattern, the fold, it's all intentional. Like visual poetry draped across shoulders. One of the elders begins singing softly as she folds a long wrap skirt. The tune is low and circular, spiraling on itself like a lullaby sung underwater. Others join in, harmonizing not in performance but in practice music, folded into movement. It's not staged, it's lived. The cloths are now stacked in piles, some meant for sale, others for gifting. You learn that gifting indigo-dyed fabric is a powerful gesture in many African cultures. A sign of respect, unity, or status. When a child is named, when a new bride is welcomed, or when an elder passes on, cloth moves from hand to hand like a river of color flowing through time. You run your hand over one stack, cool to the touch, slightly stiff, smelling faintly of ash and something mineral. Each piece is a novel, a memory, a mood board. And you think about your own closet back home, how most of it says nothing at all. No stories, no talkative spiders. One young woman tugs your sleeve and says, "Want to wear one?" You nod, obviously. She folds the cloth around your waist with practiced ease, tucking and twisting until it feels secure. It swishes slightly as you walk. You glance down and see the pattern, a triangle nested in a square. She tells you it means you belong. Okay, that one gets you a little. The sun is high again, casting patterns of its own through the rafters. And you realize suddenly, viscerally, that in this place, time isn't just measured by clocks or shadows. It's measured by layers, by depth, by color. The longer something steeps, the richer it becomes. That includes dye, that includes you. So maybe you didn't survive the startled spider motif. Maybe your wax lines looked more like squashed worms. But you learned how to speak without words today, in deep blue. You're not sure when it happened. But sometime between your third cup of millet beer and your third attempt at tying a waistband without losing dignity, you start to feel. At home, the courtyard smells like cooking smoke and fresh-washed cloth. There's a baby toddling around in one corner with indigo-stained feet and the smug confidence of someone who knows no one will dare make her wear a shirt. Women sit cross-legged with bowls in their laps, braiding raffia or plucking stray threads from finished wraps. The men, when they appear, mostly bring wood, water, or occasional jokes, which are met with practiced eye rolls. But today, your lesson is not about cloth. Not exactly. Today, you're here to learn how indigo shaped an economy. Imagine this, centuries before stock markets or online shopping. Long before the words "made in China" ever appeared on a tag, West Africa already had a thriving textile trade. Indigo-dyed cloth was one of its star exports. It wasn't just for fashion, it was currency, communication, identity, and industry. In cities like Kano in present-day Nigeria or in Mali, dye pits were more than workshops, they were institutions. Entire family lineages were built around them. Some dye pits in Kano are over 500 years old and still in use today. You lean forward as someone tells you this. It's whispering like it's a secret. 500 years. Let that roll around in your brain for a second. The demand for indigo-dyed cloth extended far beyond village borders. Traders traveled hundreds of miles with wrapped bundles on their heads, crossing deserts, forests, and rivers to exchange indigo fabric for gold, salt, cola, nuts, beads, and even horses. Caravan routes buzzed with the quiet rustle of commerce. Blue cloth from West Africa found its way to North Africa, and from there into Europe and the Middle East. Some historians argue whether the spread of indigo was driven more by aesthetics or economics. Was it the color itself that enchanted buyers, or the rarity and cost of the process? Others suggest indigo's allure was tied to its perceived spiritual power. In any case, by the 14th century, indigo cloth wasn't just a product, it was a luxury item. You're shown a bundle of worn cloth from an old trunk patch, worked and threadbare, but still striking. The elder who brings it out treats it with reverence. "This," she says, "paid for 2 cows once." You blink. She's not kidding. Quirky side fact: in some regions, indigo cloth was used in place of coinage well into the 20th century. It could settle debts, secure marriages, and bribe tax collectors. Want to impress a visiting chief? I better have a few bolts of fresh dyed indigo ready. Yeah, of course. Behind every successful dye market was a complex labor system. While many women controlled the production and design of the cloth, the dyeing vats were often maintained by hereditary guilds. In Mali and northern Nigeria, some families held exclusive knowledge of vat recipes passed down like sacred texts. These recipes were closely guarded, sometimes encoded in song or riddle, only shared with trusted kin. You hear one such riddle murmured in the shade. "My body is dry, but I breathe through water. My heart is fire, my skin is color." You raise your eyebrows. Riddle about a dye vat. It's commitment. But there's a darker thread in this textile story too. Indigo, for all its beauty, was also entangled in colonial exploitation. When European powers arrived and saw the value of indigo, they didn't just admire the cloth, they industrialized and exported it. Flooding markets with synthetic blue dye by the late 19th century, this crushed local artisans whose handmade cloth suddenly had to compete with cheap imports. Many indigo dyers saw their income plummet. Some switched to other trades, others fought back by doubling down on traditional methods, developing even more intricate patterns to distinguish their work. And in some places, women formed underground cooperatives to keep their heritage alive. When colonial powers tried to erase it, historians still argue whether the industrial decline of natural indigo was inevitable or whether it was a deliberate act of cultural suppression. Either way, it left a deep scar, and yet the color remained. In the village you're in now, the community adapted. Rather than abandon the vats, they turned them into heritage spaces. They teach children how to fold and bind. They host travelers like you, not for profit, but to pass the story on. It's because each generation dyes, not just cloth, but memory. You're asked to help bundle some finished fabric for a trip to the next market town. The bundles are surprisingly heavy, packed with care, and tied with extra strips of cotton dyed to match. As you hoist one onto your shoulder, someone chuckles your cloth wrap has come a little loose again. Too much dancing and not enough knot tying, they tease. Fair enough. You help load the bundles into a wooden cart pulled by 2 donkeys who look deeply unimpressed by everything. The road ahead is long and uneven, lined with baobab trees and the occasional roadside shrine. You'll walk part of the way with the traders tomorrow, and you're oddly excited because something has shifted. You're no longer just observing the art of indigo. You're carrying it. Literally, the economic weight, the cultural gravity. It's the fabric of exchange of blue cloth for grain, for stories, for survival. The sun begins to dip again, washing everything in warm gold, while the cloths remain resolutely blue, unmoved by shadow or distance. You rest your head back and imagine an ancient caravan, woven sandals, scraping sand, bundles swaying, and traders humming the same riddles you heard earlier. Indigo isn't just a commodity. It's a current, a pulse that once powered kingdoms and connected continents. And now you're in its story too. You wake up early again. This time, with a donkey braying somewhere near your head and the unmistakable sound of someone already negotiating prices in a tone that suggests they... Today's journey is toward the weekly market. A long walk by foot with bundles of indigo cloth stacked on a cart and balanced carefully on heads and shoulders. The early air is still crisp, but the day promises heat. Dust puffs up beneath each footfall, and the cloth sways rhythmically with every step. It's almost hypnotic. You walk with the others, nestled among chatter and laughter. Occasionally you catch snippets of gossip. Who's marrying whom? Whose goat escaped into the millet field? And who used the wrong shade of indigo and now has a cloth that looks like moldy corn porridge? Brutal. But the journey also gives you time to reflect on something that hasn't been named yet: timelessness. See, nobody here wears a wristwatch. There are no alarms, no hourly reminders from smartphones pinging into existence. Yet everything moves with an inner rhythm. You've noticed it now, the pace of cloth soaked and dried, the cycle of stitching and steaming, the rising and falling tempo of voices depending on where the sun is in the sky. Historians still debate whether this internal clock was shaped more by climate, culture, or necessity. What they do agree on is that this sense of time organic, embodied is central to how African dyeing traditions have endured for centuries. There are no deadlines here, only readiness. You pass a woman seated under a palm, binding a new piece of cloth with an absurdly complicated crisscross of raffia. She's been working on it since before sunrise. She doesn't check the time. She checks the feel of the fabric, the way her hands remember tension and release. She tells you the cloth knows when it's ready, and somehow you believe her. This whole practice thrives without clocks, or rather it replaces clocks with cues: the sound of the mortar grinding, the heat rising off the dye vat, the call of a bird that only sings when the dye should be pulled from the water. At the market, a different kind of rhythm takes over. It's loud, chaotic, beautiful. Imagine a kaleidoscope of color and motion. Stalls lined with spices, beads, carved masks, baskets, dried fish, and of course mounds of indigo cloth in every imaginable pattern. Some pieces look like night skies shattered by stars. Others like blue fire spiraling outward in repeating loops. You watch as traders haggle in multiple languages at once: Hausa, Yoruba, full-fouled, French, and a bit of English thrown in for flair. There's no standard pricing. Everything is negotiable. One bundle of cloth is bartered for 2 bags of grain, another for a carved stool, one for a small goat that keeps trying to chew on your sandal. Here's a fun detail. In some areas, dye traders were known for their elaborate bargaining rituals. They'd whisper prices behind fans or pass notes folded into cloth corners. It was all very theatrical and also very efficient. Negotiation wasn't just commerce. It was an art. A woman pulls you aside to show her wares rows of folded fabric, each marked with chalk to indicate design complexity. She explains the codes quickly. 1 for simple, 2 for ceremonial, 3 for you, better bring a cow, or don't bother. You laugh, and she smiles, but the message is clear. The cloth speaks before she does. This, too, is a kind of timekeeping cloths marked not by hours, but by how long they took to make. Some took days, others weeks. The most elaborate months passed between generations. One cloth is named "Waited for the Rain," another is called "When the Moon Disappeared." You think about your calendar back home, color-coded, stress-packed, alarm-filled, and feel oddly embarrassed. There is a long-standing scholarly debate over whether pre-colonial African societies had advanced concepts of time. The argument usually depends on what one considers advanced. Clocks, sundials, calendars, sure. But here, time isn't tracked so much as trusted. It's lived through cycles, through repetition, through doing. You help one of the traders fold cloth back into neat stacks. You're slower than her, obviously, and she keeps laughing and redoing your work. You fold like someone who's never folded life, she jokes. Whatever that means, it sounds profound. As you move through the market, you notice how the cloth doesn't just sell, it performs. One seller throws pieces into the air and lets them float down dramatically before catching them at the last second. Another sings a short tune about each pattern. This one is for protection, she sings. This one is for lovers who don't listen. This one is for weddings where nobody invites the aunt who steals rice. You decide you need that last one. By mid-afternoon, the heat has hit full blast. Traders take shade under palm-thatched lean-tos, sipping cool water and chewing cola nuts. Children dart between stalls, some wearing tiny scraps of indigo tied like superhero capes. You're handed a small piece of cloth wrapped around roasted peanuts. A gift. No reason, just you walked well today. That small gesture hits you harder than expected. The cloth you carried earlier is gone, now traded or sold, handed off into new hands and new stories, yet you feel like you're still carrying something. The weight of a tradition that never needed hours or minutes to know how to move. When it's time to leave, no bell rings. No alarm sounds. Someone just stands, stretches, and says, "We go." And just like that, you're walking again, towards sunset and home. The road back is quiet. You hum to yourself. Maybe the tune the woman sang. Maybe something new. No one tells you how long the walk is. Because time is not measured in miles here. It's measured in memory. You're back in the village, feet sore, but soul weirdly light, like a balloon full of woven stories. After the bustle of the market, this return feels almost like slipping into warm water. Everything moves slower again. Even the chickens seem more philosophical now. Someone hands you a calabash of water before you can ask. You're grateful and spill half of it down your shirt, which is now permanently dyed with sweat, dust, and probably a splash of peanut oil. Congratulations, you've become a living textile. As you sink into a low stool beneath a neem tree, the elders begin to talk, not to preach, but to share. Their voices ease into the dusk like wind through woven straw mats. And tonight, the stories revolve around the spiritual side of indigo. See, the cloth isn't just blue. It's sacred. In many West African cultures, indigo was believed to have protective powers. The dyeing process itself, mysterious, murky, almost alchemical, was considered spiritual work. You're told that, in some traditions, women who dyed with indigo were believed to hold special powers. They could pull color from nothing, as one woman puts it. They make the unseen seen. A soft murmur of agreement follows. No one here takes that lightly. One elder says, indigo keeps away bad spirits. Other nods, adding, it can also attract good ones, if you hum the right song. You ask what song that is? But they just laugh and change the subject. Naturally, there's an ongoing scholarly debate over whether indigo's spiritual role predates its economic value, or if it was revered because of its value. Did people respect it because it was hard to make, or because it seemed to possess a will of its own? Honestly, sitting here under stars and stories, it feels like both. You're shown a cloth with an especially complex pattern, dyed a rich, almost black blue. This one was made for a birth ceremony. You trace the tiny motif spiral's hands, what looks like a comb. Each symbol means something: protection, health, the child's path through life. The cloth was meant to be worn by the new mother, then folded and saved. It becomes a kind of soft heirloom, passed down or repurposed for future rites of passage. Then comes the quirky tidbit of the night. In some communities, indigo wasn't just used for clothing. It was painted onto doorways to keep out witches. One family even mixed indigo into wall plaster. You imagine that dark blue shimmer flickering in candlelight, and suddenly understand how magic starts? You listen as someone begins a tale about the first indigo vats that to have been gifted by a river spirit in exchange for a calabash of honey and the promise of silence. The story shifts fluidly, from folklore to personal memory and back again. It's hard to tell where one ends and the other begins, as the beauty of it. Someone nearby begins a soft drumming on an overturned bucket. Not for a performance, just instinct. It underscores the words like a heartbeat. You start to piece things together. Indigo isn't just fabric. It's function and form, trade and tradition, spirit and symbol. It wraps the body. Yes, but it also wraps identity. Who you are, where you belong, what you believe. In fact, in certain societies, the way indigo's worn tells others everything they need to know about your clan, your marital status, your wealth, even your mood. A tightly wrapped indigo turban might signal mourning. A casually knotted scarf might say, "I'm single, and yes, I do know how to dance." You can't help but notice. All the indigo women here move with calm authority. They're not loud, but everyone listens when they speak. It's not about AGI, it's about presence. Dyers hold knowledge that isn't just technical, it's ancestral. Each batch of dye, each folded cloth, is a conversation between generations. You think back to that vat from earlier, the one that looked like a quiet well, bubbling ever so slightly. It's not hard to believe spirits might be involved, especially when you retold that some dyers offer prayers or small gifts to their vats before each session. Coin, a song, a whispered thanks. You want to laugh, but somehow you don't. You're handed a new piece of cloth, a thank you, they say, for carrying bundles to market. It's deep blue with patterns shaped like leaves and water drops. Protection for the road, someone adds. You ask if you should hang it above your bed, or fold it in your shoes, one offers, so you walk wisely. Or wear it as a hat, another suggests, so your head doesn't go soft. You raise an eyebrow. Too late, someone whispers, and everyone laughs. You laugh too. As the sky deepens and stars take over, you notice the cloth you've been given is still faintly damp. It smells like dye, sun, and something else. Something older, something unnameable. Yes. You fold it into your lap and sit quietly. There's no ceremony, no final word. The stories wind down naturally, like fire embers cooling. A child curls up next to you. Someone hums. No one will shout. The rhythm will start all over again, like a song with no beginning and no end. You don't need to know what time it is. You're exactly where you're meant to be. You wake up slowly. Not because of an alarm or a rooster, but because someone nearby is singing a low, melodic chant, not meant for you, but carried on the wind all the same. You blink open your eyes, and for a moment, you forget where you are. Then the smell of the indigo, earthy and faintly metallic, seeps into your memory like a bookmark pressed between two pages. Today, it's all about technique. And let's be honest, your odds of messing this up are somewhere between very likely and historically inevitable. But still, you're excited. They hand you a square of unbleached cotton and a fistful of raffia strands. Your job? Tie it. Resist the temptation to just bunch it up like a lunch bag and call it a day. No, this is art, and art demands patience, which, let's face it, is not your strongest suit. You watch as one of the women folds her cloth into what looks like a tiny accordion, then wraps it in raffia with the precision of someone who's done this since they could walk. Her fingers move fast, twisting and knotting, creating a resist pattern that will block the dye in certain areas. This is tie-dye, but not the rainbow-splotched chaos from summer camp. This is structured, symbolic, practiced. In Japanese, it might be called shibori. They're not just decorative, they tell stories, represent families, or indicate regional styles. It's kind of like wearing your hometown on your sleeve, literally. The raffia has a mind of its own, fighting every loop and twist like a rebellious noodle. You try to copy a pattern you saw earlier, only to end up with what looks like a confused octopus. Maybe it is an octopus, one of the women teases. Maybe you invented something new. You nod sagely, like that was the plan all along. The cloths are gathered into a basket and brought to the vat. This one's darker than the others, nearly black on the surface. It's been fermenting longer, and when stirred, it sends up bubbles like a brewing potion. You hesitate. It looks like something that could bite. But they nod, so you dunk your fabric in. It disappears into the depths. Here's the quirky bit. When you pull the cloth out, it's green, not blue, not even close. The indigo doesn't actually turn blue until it oxidizes in the air exposed to light and wind. So you wave your soggy bundle around like a flag, watching the colors slowly shift. It's a little like magic, a little like chemistry, and a lot like anxiety, because you really don't want your cloth to look like swamp lettuce. This oxidation process fascinates historians. They still argue whether early dyers fully understood the chemical principles or simply mastered the technique through observation and oral transmission. No one was jotting down step 3. Oxygen exposure catalyzes indoxyl to form indigo. They just knew. You repeat the dipping process dye, lift, wave, wait, multiple times. With each layer, the cloth deepens in hue. It's a buildup of color, not a one-and-done deal, like trust or lasagna or regret. Eventually, someone declares your cloth blue enough. Can't tell if they're impressed or just tired of watching you flail, but you'll take the win. Now comes the drying phase. Cloths are draped over ropes, sticks, and sometimes just laid out on thatched rooftops. You look around and realize the village has transformed into a gallery. Everywhere you turn, deep blue textiles ripple in the breeze like a giant slow-moving ocean. You ask how they'll remember which cloth belongs to whom. The answer, we remember. No names, no tags, just memory and community. And possibly a mild panic when someone picks up the wrong octopus print. While the cloths dry, you sit with a group of young girls learning to tie for the first time. Their fingers fumble like yours did earlier, but they laugh through it. One shows you a tiny knot she calls baby snail. Another insists hers looks like a frog who gave up. You not impressed. She might be 10, but she already understands modern adulthood. You listen to their chatter. It's light, playful, but also full of inherited wisdom. They talk about how indigo feels on their skin, how to know when the raffia is too dry, how to wrap cloth so it smells like smoke and not mildew. They don't think of themselves as artists or preservers of heritage. They're just doing what was done before them. There's a comfort in that. In routine passed down by hands, not apps. One of the older women joins you and shows a more complex folding technique called adire alibari, which involves sewing tiny stitches into the cloth before dyeing. When undone, these stitches form elaborate lace-like patterns. Sewing before dyeing it's an added step, a gamble, a silent prayer that the pattern will survive the vat. Some designs can take days just to prepare. That's right. Days spent sewing something that might unravel in seconds if the dye bleeds too far. Why risk it, you ask? She shrugs. 'Cause sometimes beauty asks for bravery. Okay, now you're emotional. Thanks a lot. As sunset approaches, the cloths are collected. Yours is brought over, still damp but unmistakably unique. The once chaotic folds now form a spiral pattern, accidental, maybe, but striking. One girl calls it Storm Eye. You decide that's the name? Storm Eye sounds mysterious, possibly a superhero origin story. You carry the cloth with a weird kind of pride. It's flawed, sure. Lumpy in places. Some of the lines are wobbly, but it's yours. And it worked. You made something with your hands, with help, with laughter, with patience you didn't know you had. But you did something slow, something imprecise, something beautiful, all without checking a single clock. You've barely had time to admire your indigo masterpiece when the next lesson begins, not with a bell, but with the rustle of leaves and the sound of wooden tools thudding into the earth. You follow the sound and find a circle forming under the baobab tree, the place where the elder artisans gathered to do something that, until today, you didn't realize was an art form. Folding. Yes, folding. Not just stuffing laundry into drawers, but deliberate, elegant manipulation of fabric into wearable architecture. Welcome to the physics of fabric without the math headache. A cloth, you're told, is only as powerful as the way it's worn. A long indigo wrapper can become a skirt, a head wrap, a baby carrier, a sling for firewood, or even a makeshift curtain in a moment of need. The same rectangle of dyed cotton holds dozens of identities, like a shapeshifter that never complains. You sit, legs crossed. As one woman call her auntie, because everyone else does, takes a fresh strip of indigo and folds it into a head wrap that looks like it belongs on a runway. 3 twists, a knot, a tuck. Boom. Instant regality. You try to copy her. You fail. Spectacularly. Your version looks like a pillow lost a fight. You need more forehead, she jokes. Or more practice. Both are probably true. This art of folding isn't just practical. It's cultural shorthand. The way a cloth is wrapped can communicate everything from age to mood to social role. A loosely draped wrapper may signal ease or casualness. A tightly cinched fold with crisp lines could reflect mourning, ceremony, or status. In some traditions, widows wear the indigo cloth wrapped without adornment. In others, brides wear layers so intricate that it takes a team of women to wrap and rewrap them properly. Here's a fun historical fact. In Mali, especially among the Bamana people, there was once a whole ceremony around a woman's first time wearing indigo. It was a rite of passage, as meaningful as a quinceañera or graduation. Indigo didn't just mark maturity, it bestowed it. Now, for a juicy little fringe tidbit, certain ancient West African texts and oral records suggest that indigo folding styles were also used in covert communication. One knot tied under instead of over might signal a hidden message, a secret meeting, or even a warning. Fashion is espionage. You'll never look at a head wrap the same way again. You practice folding your own cloth around your waist, your chest, and finally your head. Each version takes shape with trial and error and a lot of helpful laughter from your instructors. Someone suggests you fold it like the moon phase, as small to large, curl to edge. You try it. You squint at your reflection in a basin. You look like a deeply confused fortune teller. It's perfect. Historians still argue whether these styles evolved from necessity or aesthetics. One elder murmurs, watching the group. But we say, might not both? She's got a point. A head wrap can shield from sun, hide a bad hair day, and make you look like you run an empire all in one go. The older girls are practicing a dance, not a performance, more like an expression. Their wrappers flutter as they move, but stay secured by expertly tied knots. Each step causes the indigo fabric to sway like waves, rhythmic, purposeful. You start to see the garments not as still things, but moving parts of a larger cultural machine. There's something meditative about folding fabric again and again. It's testing new ways to wrap and rewrap the same square into something new. It mirrors life, doesn't it? Repeating shapes, subtle changes. All the while, the material wears down, fades at the corners, softens with time. And somehow, it becomes more precious, not less. You're shown how to fold cloth for storage, now an entirely different discipline. The cloth must be pleated along its existing folds to keep memory, one woman says. That phrase sticks with you, keep memory. Like the fabric remembers how it was last worn, and will fall back into shape easier next time. You wish people worked that way. Lunch arrives, carried on the heads of women walking with perfect balance. You're amazed again. Someone hands you a bowl millet porridge with a dollop of something spicy. The cloth you dyed earlier has dried now, folded neatly beside your seat. It's darker in the sun than it looked last night. You can't resist smoothing it out, tracing your fingers along the spiral pattern. Storm eye, you fold it the way they showed you, edge to edge, then twist, then tuck. You're not great at it, but you're getting better. Nearby, a baby is swaddled in a piece of soft, faded indigo. The cloth isn't decorated just one solid blue, lightened by years of wash and sun. It's thin now, nearly sheer in places, but still strong. The mother rocks gently, humming. The baby blinks up, half-lidded, already drifting into a nap, wrapped in fabric, dyed long before he was born. You realize something profound. In this world, cloth doesn't just cover bodies, it carries time. So many hands have touched it, gathered the leaves, fermented the dye, tied the raffia, dipped the cotton, folded the wraps. It's art made from effort, over and over again, until it becomes second nature. Try again, someone tells you, watching you struggle with another head wrap attempt. You sigh. This one's for symmetry. They chuckle. Symmetry is optional. Style is forever. You grin, adjust the cloth one last time, and look toward the horizon. Indigo shadows stretch across the ground like falling ribbons. The day is winding down, but the folds of fabric, of memory, of meaning, remain. And now, you're part of that fold too. You still tracing the folds of your cloth when someone gently taps your shoulder and gestures for you to follow. No words, just a glance and a nod, like they know you're ready for the next part. You tuck your bundle of indigo under your arm and stand, brushing off the dust. This time, your steps lead not to the vat or the baobab shade, but to the edge of the village, to a quieter, more intimate space where stories are stitched instead of spoken aloud. and the medium stitcherist dying. Or as it's known here, a dira la bear. You sit beside a woman hunched over a length of pale cotton. She doesn't look up right away. Just keeps sewing with a rhythm you can practically hear a whisper of thread against cloth. A hush of breath each time the needle pulls through. Eventually she speaks. You're ready to listen with your fingers now? You glance at the needle and thread she offers you. Listen with your fingers? That sounds poetic and mildly terrifying. But you nod. Because saying no feels like missing a train that only passes once. She shows you how to fold a section of the fabric accordion style, then sew tiny running stitches along the ridges. Each stitch is a place where dye will not reach. The smaller the stitches, the finer the final pattern. She pulls the thread tight until the fabric scrunches like a little caterpillar. Now it's your turn. Your first row is too loose, your second too tight, and your third somehow ends up diagonal, even though no one asked it to. But there's something soothing in this repetition. In, out, pulled tight. Don't bleed. You fall into a kind of sleepy trance, like knitting with purpose. This technique has existed for centuries, probably longer. The exact origin? Historians still argue whether it began independently in West Africa or was influenced by North African trade routes, where textiles moved with merchants like pollen on the wind. What's clear is that West African women took it and made it their own with motifs that mean more than just decoration. You lean in as your teacher unfurls a finished piece. It looks like lace carved in deep blue stone waves of crescent moons, lines of lizard tails, rows of eyes and feathers, and unknown alphabets. Each one is a whisper, she says, of a woman, or a season, or a secret. One pattern, she tells you, is called Tears of the Crocodile. Another is Zigzag of Lightning. There's even one named the Back of the Tortoise, symbolizing patience and protection. That one feels just right for you, especially after your folding fiasco. Want a quirky fact? Some traditional patterns were passed down through dreams. Women claimed to see visions while sleeping, waking up with the urge to stitch the shapes before they vanished like morning mist. Whether mystical or mnemonic, these patterns stitch their way into history one loop at a time. As the afternoon passes, the stitching circle grows. It's all women, all generations. Some chatter, some hum, some work in absolute silence. No clocks tick, no screens flicker. Just the low drone of activity, the occasional burst of laughter, and the click of metal needles against wooden beads. The cloth you're stitching is far from perfect, but you start to see the potential. Imagine dipping it in indigo, the dye creeping up the ridges, stopped by your thread barriers. When it's dry and you snip the stitches, each line will reveal itself a reverse tattoo etched by patience. The woman beside you chuckles as you redo a wonky line. Your cloth is learning your mood, she says. Be kind or it will remember. You glance down at the puckered section. Okay, that does look like anxiety in fabric form. Still, you can't help but smile. There's something wildly comforting about the idea that cloth remembers. During a break, someone brings bowls of roasted groundnuts and sweet tea. You sip slowly, watching the sun drop behind a curtain of indigo textiles. Shadows stretch. A chicken wanders across your view. The village doesn't slow down. It simply shifts gears. Men return from distant fields. Kids gather for evening games. Women wrap up their stitch work and roll their cloths into neat bundles. You tuck yours into your lap, still unfinished, but heavier, now weighted with time, effort, and story. Here's a fun mainstream fact to chew on with your groundnuts. Indigo-dyed cloths, especially the hand-stitched varieties, were once used as currency in parts of West Africa. That's right, literal money. Call them cloth money, or trade cloths. A bolt of richly dyed, intricately stitched cotton could be traded for goods, livestock, or even passage across territories. Forget Bitcoin, try earning fabric that took weeks to make. You watch as the women carefully pack away their supplies, needles tucked into cloth bundles. Spools of thread wound like tiny sunbursts, fabrics folded with the reverence of holy books. You're told these tools are often inherited, passed from mother to daughter. One woman shows you her grandmother's needle case, worn leather, soft from decades of use, the stitching still strong. You ask if anyone ever throws these cloths away. Throw away? Someone echoes, aghast. No. When it's too old to wear, we turn it into something new. A wrapper becomes a pillow becomes a quilt becomes a shroud. Cloth goes on, we just change its name. Even in death, the indigo wraps the body one last time. It's a final embrace from the living to the departed. It's a soft blue farewell. Someone starts a fire, and you feel the warmth from across the courtyard. Your cloth is folded now, still imperfect, but precious. You think of all the layers of time, of color, of meaning bound inside that simple square. The thread marks you stitch today will resist tomorrow's dye, like scars that refuse to be hidden. Every stitch, every dip, every story. You tuck the fabric under your arm again, aware of its quiet weight. You're not just holding a textile, you're holding memory, resistance, and a whisper of the people who made it. The morning dew clings to the grass like the last sigh of night. You're up early, cloth in hand, following a line of barefooted footsteps that vanish into the mist. Ahead you spot them, the women, already gathered, already moving, as if rest is something they store between blinks. Today, it's time to dye the stitch-resist cloth you worked so hard on. You're not just dipping plain fabric hue, re-dyeing a memory you stitched into place with your own hands. If your lines hold, if your knots are tight enough, they'll whisper back at you when the cloth dries. You approach the vat again, and this time, you don't hesitate. You breathe in fermented leaf, wood smoke, and iron-rich soil and reach toward the indigo surface. It no longer feels alien. It feels earned. You dip the scrunched-up cloth slowly, the tight ridges blooming like sea creatures beneath the surface. The women nod. You're learning. You gently swish it through. You remember the rule. The cloth must be dipped, then removed quickly. The color appears when the air kisses it. You lift it out, and like magic, the cloth is greenish. Then slowly, breath by breath, it turns blue, darker, deeper, moodier with each moment. You dip again and again. By the fourth dip, your arms ache. By the fifth, your knots start to weep indigo. You think about giving up, but that S, when someone tells you 5 is the number of thunder, 6 is for ancestors, you smile, nod, and go for 7. Lucky number 7. Your cloth dries in the sun. Another woman shows you how to open up a finished resist-dyed textile. She snips the threads with tiny shears, each cut like a heartbeat. She stretches it, revealing the design in full. Dancing birds, spiraling eyes, zigzag rivers. It's like watching someone unfold a story you didn't know you were inside. Your own cloth is ready. It's dry now, but crinkled like 100 secrets. You sit on a low stool, small knife in hand, and start to snip your stitches one by one. It takes longer than you thought it would. It always does. The thread pulls free in little curls. Sometimes it catches. Sometimes it rips. You wince, then you laugh. Then you try again, bit by bit. Your pattern reveals itself. There's a spiral there, a row of stars. There, that squiggly line that was definitely not supposed to be there, but now kind of looks like a snake. So you pretend you meant it. Your teacher peeks over your shoulder and nods. You've made something only your hands could have made, she says. And that's not just sweet talk. That's the whole point. A fun mainstream history moment. Many indigo resist-dyed fabrics from Nigeria, especially those made by Yoruba women, were once exported to Europe during the 19th century. European collectors bought them by the bolt, mesmerized by the intricate designs and depth of color. Some of these textiles ended up in museums, others in Victorian parlors, where they were admired but not always understood. Imagine your grandmother's table runner was secretly a message in cloth from a woman 3,000 miles away. Wild. On the fringe side of things, some researchers believe specific indigo motifs may have contained symbolic codes. Much like the quilts associated with the Underground Railroad in the United States. Though this idea is still debated, it's not entirely impossible. Patterns, after all, can be memory, protest, prayer, or warning. Historians still argue whether these hidden messages were intentional or accidental. But one thing is certain. The hands that stitched them weren't just decorating. They were communicating. You stretch out your cloth in full now, letting it catch the breeze. It flutters, proud and messy and perfectly you. Someone claps. You blush. And then, because you're part of this world now, you're given another piece of cloth blank, untouched. Your next assignment. You sigh. Mock dramatic. I just finished, they laugh. Indigo never stops. You look down at your hands. Indigo stains your fingernails, seeps into your cuticles. Your palms are ghosted with blue lines where the dye has settled. You flex your fingers and realize, this is your badge now. You belong. Someone passes you a calabash bowl. Inside is water laced with lemon juice and ash soap. You dip your hands in and scrub, but the blue won't come off entirely. It's sunk in too deep. Good, your teacher says. Now you can't lie. Your hands will always remember. The rest of the day drifts by in slow waves conversations, quiet chores, moments where no one speaks because the wind is talking louder than words. You help hang someone else's cloth on the drying line. This one is covered in diamonds, spirals, and little footprints. Each piece on that line is its own constellation, a sky of stories, fabric firmament. And now yours hangs there too, swaying gently among the others, absorbing sun and wind and the collective gaze of those who came before you. You sit down on a flat stone, sun-warmed and smooth, and trace the edge of your cloth once more. You can believe how far it's come from a plain white square to this indigo narrative stitched with your own rhythm, your own spirit. Someone asks what you'll name it. You pause. Maybe. Snake who got lost. Everyone laughs. But inside, you're proud, because that snake is you, squiggling your way through a world without clocks, without rush, guided only by breath and patience. That evening, just as the last cloths come down and the vats are covered again with wooden lids, you hear singing, low humming, rhythmic. The women are chanting an old song, half lullaby, half spell, something about the moon and the river, something about a cloth that knows your story better than you do. And as the song fades, you close your eyes and think, yes, yes it does. You're woken not by a rooster, but by a thud of firm, rhythmic thump from across the village. Not angry, not urgent, just ... determined. You stretch under your woven blanket, yawn your way upright, and wander barefoot toward the sound. It's a woman pounding something with a wide wooden pestle and a carved mortar the size of a baby elephant. She pauses, nods at you, and points into the bowl. Indigo cake crumbled, dry, concentrated. The rich, fermented stuff from the dye vat pressed into bricks and left to dry under the sun like sacred cookies. This is Osun indigo pigment cake, ready for transport, sale, or trade. And it's not just a local Goodite-spin currency, medicine, even spiritual armor. Today, you're going with her on a trade journey. She packs the cakes into cloth bundles, ties them to a large tray balanced effortlessly on her head, and sets off along a dirt path without waiting to see if you'll follow. You do, obviously, because what's cooler than a morning trek with pigment peddlers? The walk is long, birds call from above. The path crunches underfoot. She doesn't speak much, just hums something hypnotic as you move through farms, forests, and tiny hamlets. Eventually you arrive at a bustling crossroad town. Stalls buzz with trade. Yams stacked like cannonballs, smoked fish curled in baskets, beadwork shimmering under dusty sunlight. But the star attraction today? Indigo. Her bundle is unwrapped like treasure, and buyers immediately gather. Some inspect the texture, others smell it. One man even tastes it. You try not to stare. Apparently a good indigo cake should smell fermented but clean, and leave a dark blue streak when rubbed on cloth or skin. One customer trades ground millet for 2 cakes. Another swaps a bolt of raffia for 1 indigo loaf and a handful of cola nuts. And one woman, dressed in what looks like 3 generations of layered indigo garments. She grins. Better than silver if you know where to go. Mainstream history backs her up. In many parts of pre-colonial West Africa, indigo-dyed cloth and its pigment were so valued that they served as a form of soft currency. In Mali, Nigeria, and Ghana, indigo-dyed wrappers were used in barter, bride price negotiations, and ceremonial exchanges. In some markets, a well-dyed cloth could buy livestock, secure land, or pay a fine. What money is to the modern world, indigo often was to traditional West African economies, especially in female-led trade networks. Indigo meant independence. It meant leverage. It meant power. You sit beside her stall and watch the social fabric unfold. No pun intended. The market isn't just commerce, it's connection. Each trade is a conversation, a dance, a micro-negotiation between equals. It's loud but joyful, competitive but playful. At one point, you see a group of women comparing patterns on their indigo garments, like it's a Fashion Week runway. They critique each other's resist designs, show off hidden motifs, and compliment depth of color. One points to her cloth and says, "This is for dips and a slap from my mother." Everyone laughs. You're not sure what the slap was for, but the blue's beautiful. Here is a curious tidbit from the fringe side. Some oral traditions suggest that women who mastered indigo dyeing were considered too powerful to marry easily. The logic went something like if a woman can coax blue from a leaf, control heat and air without clocks, and hold court in the marketplace, what man could possibly keep up? Some of these stories are teasing, others cautionary, but many reveal how deep the respect for these artisans ran. Historians still argue whether these women held formal guild roles akin to professional associations, or if their authority was more informal, woven into family status and sheer mastery. What's clear is that in the economies of the time, especially those stretching along trans-Saharan and river trade routes, indigo wasn't just decoration, it was leverage. Back in the market, a woman taps your shoulder and asks if you're selling. You blink, look down, and realize she's pointing to the little bundle of indigo cloth tucked under your arm.
Out.
Your cloth, the one you stitched and dyed and named Snake, who got lost. You're speechless for a moment. It's your baby, your beautiful, blotchy, imperfect indigo snake baby. How much? She asks again gently. Your companion watches you with a knowing look. It's up to you. You shake your head, smiling, not for sale. The woman shrugs, then grins. Smart. And just like that, your cloth gains another kind of worth. It's not just pigment and thread now. It's legacy, not to be traded, not today. By midday, most of the indigo cakes are gone. Your companion counts her earnings, some in grain, some in beads, some in cloth. No paper money in sight. Just value you can eat, wear, plant, or gift. Before you leave, you spot a boy dipping a rough strip of cotton into a small vat behind a stall. His hands are already blue, and he hums a tune like it's the most normal thing in the world. Another generation learning the rhythm. As you head back to the village, your bundle feels heavier than it should. Not physically, just emotionally. Carries the weight of meaning now, of trade and tradition. Of all the invisible hands that wove the past into the present. You asked your guide why she started dyeing indigo in the first place. She shrugs, then says, "Because I liked the way the color hides until it breathes." I feels honest. You look down at your own stained fingers and nod. Back in the village, the sun hangs low. You're tired. But it's the good kind of tired. The kind that wraps around your bones like warm fabric. And tomorrow, there's another blank cloth waiting. The sky tonight is an indigo of its own, deep and velvety, scattered with a few cautious stars. You're lying on a mat outside the dye hut, still awake, still thinking. The air smells like charred wood, crushed leaves, and a faint trace of blue. Your fingertips, stained and cracked, rest against your chest like badges of something ancient and unfinished. You're wondering, how far did this go? This dye, this knowledge, this breathy color-making art. Surely it wasn't just here. So you rise, stretch, and follow a trail of thought that winds beyond your village, beyond the West African savanna, out into the wider world. Because indigo isn't just a color. It's a passport. It's a thread across continents. And its story is longer and twistier than most people realize. You begin with what you know. West African women, the keepers of the dye pots. But from there, the tale blooms outward like a resist pattern unfurling after its final rinse. Sailors once called it blue gold. European merchants in the 16th and 17th centuries were practically drooling for the stuff. Before synthetic dye came along and messed everything up with its fast fashion shortcuts. True indigo from plants like Indigofera tinctoria and Indigofera subfruticosa was one of the most traded dyes on Earth. And the indigo you've been working with? It's Lonchocarpocine essence, native to West Africa. A different branch on the indigo family tree, but no less potent. Some plants prefer tropical rains, some favor dry Sahel winds. But all of them, in their own way, bleed blue when treated with the right rituals. Mainstream history alert. During the transatlantic trade era, indigo became a major plantation crop in places like South Carolina, the Caribbean, and Brazil. And tragically, that meant enslaved Africans, many of whom already knew the secrets of indigo. Dyeing were forced to work in brutal indigo fields and vats overseas. They didn't just harvest the plant, they brought the knowledge, the techniques, the soul of it. One whispered debate in the scholarly world is whether enslaved West Africans deliberately preserved aspects of their textile and dyeing traditions in the Americas, coding resistance and memory into the cloths they were forced to make. Historians still argue whether specific plantation-era indigo processes reflect continuity from African methods or were entirely reinvented under duress, but either way, those blue stains run deep. And here's something on the quirkier side. There are stories of people in the Caribbean and South America referring to the indigo vats as witch-esque cauldrons. Why? Because of how the liquid looked, bubbling, greenish, alive. And what it did? How it turned color only when lifted into air. Magic, clearly. Science, too. But to a tired overseer or a child peeking past a barn door, it must have looked like sorcery. You're not leaving, not exactly. Stretching the boundaries of the map in your mind. Indigo also touched Asia. In Japan, azome dyeing became a national art form. Samurai wore indigo undergarments, believing the color to have antibacterial and wound-healing powers. In India, Neil was cultivated for centuries, until colonial powers hijacked the crop and oppressed the farmers so brutally that a full-blown rebellion, the Indigo Revolt of 1859, exploded in Bengal. Same color, different struggle, and Europe. Indigo replaced the older woad dye, which was blue but weaker. When indigo arrived on the scene, it was like iPhones replacing flip phones. Of course, the woad growers didn't take this lying down. They tried to ban indigo in places like Germany and France, calling it the devil's dye. It failed. Indigo triumphed. So, as you sit on a rock overlooking the quiet road, you realize this humble cloth you dyed last week? It has cousins on every continent. They'd understand. They've all touched the vat. You begin to feel a bit like a time traveler, not one who zaps through wormholes, but one who touches something and feels its age. Indigo isn't just a color. It's an echo, a bruise, a promise. You think of those women in the market, the men who tasted pigment like wine, the little boy learning how to dip, the slaves who remembered the recipe even in chains, the Bengal farmers who said enough, the Japanese dyers folding shibori cloth into intricate origami stars. And yes, your own squiggly snake design. You too are part of the fabric now. Back in the village, the evening fire crackles. A few women hum softly, sewing or stirring or simply sitting. You join them without speaking. The warmth kisses your skin. The dye hut looms like a sleeping beast behind you, quiet, but not forgotten. Someone passes a bowl your way. Inside, jollof rice, spicy and smoky, studded with charred onion and fish. You sway a little without meaning to, and as your eyes begin to blur with exhaustion, one final thought drifts across your mind. The world is stitched together by women who dye blue with no clocks, no calendars, no rush. Just rhythm. You're lying back on your mat, eyes half-lidded, your breath syncing with the slow, endless rhythm of distant insects. Tonight is quiet, heavy quiet, not the fearful kind, the deep, velvety, stitched-in kind. Like everything around you has been dyed in peace. You're not quite dreaming, not quite awake, just floating like that cloth in the vat, suspended between breath and bloom. Earlier today, you noticed something curious while folding your cloth. A tiny handprint, just the size of your thumb, left faintly in the indigo. You must have touched it while it was drying. But now, it looks like a whisper of someone else. A ghost hand, a signature. And somehow, you don't want to wash it out. You want it to stay there as proof that this happened, that you were part of it. The other women teased you gently when they saw it. One said, "That's how you know the spirit approved." Another added, "Or a goat stepped on it." You'll take either explanation, honestly. You think about how time passed, not with ticking clocks or chiming bells, but with vats deepening, cloths darkening, laughter growing louder, fingers turning blue. The days rolled forward like a bolt of fabric and marked, unmeasured but undeniably full. Here's your last big historical reveal before we drift away. Archaeologists in West Africa have found dye pits in Kano, Nigeria, dating back over 500 years, and some evidence points to indigo use going back even earlier. Some pits are still active today, same holes in the earth, still fermenting blue, still breathing with the knowledge of hands long gone. What's debated among historians is whether these dyeing traditions were entirely local innovations, or if they were influenced by even older trade routes northward, through Saharan cities, eastward toward Nubia and Egypt, perhaps even beyond. No one's pinned it down yet, and honestly, maybe that's the point. Some knowledge isn't meant to be traced, it's meant to be felt. And quirky fact, time just for fun before you snooze. There are rumors in some rural villages that a vat, once blessed and fermenting properly, must never be pointed at with your finger. It's considered bad luck. You can look, whisper, stir, but not point. The vat knows, they say, and it doesn't like to be singled out. You don't know if it's true, but ever since someone warned you, you've kept your hands respectfully clasped behind your back every time you pass it, just in case. Tonight, you hear those same vats bubbling softly behind the dye hut. They sound like snoring dragons, comforting, ancient, alive. Tonight, you hear those same vats bubbling softly behind the dye hut. They sound like snoring dragons, comforting, ancient, alive. And maybe that's the real gift of this whole experience, not just the craft, just the history, but the way it changes how you hear the world. Indigo doesn't shout, it doesn't sparkle. It waits, it rewards those who do the same. You roll over, your indigo cloth bundled up like a pillow under your cheek. It smells faintly of the river, of smoke, of something green and ghostly. You close your eyes, and that color blooms again behind your lids. Not green, not blue, just indigo. The color of dusk, of bruises, of breath held in. Tomorrow, you'll rise without a clock. Just the sun brushing your eyelids, and the sound of someone stirring ash. You'll dip another cloth, or stitch, or simply sit. No, just rhythm. Just return. Just return. And even if you leave this village someday, fly home. Zip yourself back into modernity with its buzzing phones and microwave dinners. That blue will stay on your fingers a little longer than you expect. Weeks, maybe. Or forever. Because that's what indigo does, it dyes more than cloth. Dyes you. Let your body begin to soften now. Release your jaw. Let your shoulders melt like cloth soaking gently in the warmth of still water. The story has carried you far from quiet vats under starlit skies. 2 bustling trade markets, 2 ancient dye pits still breathing in silence. And now, with your head nestled on that imaginary bundle of cloth, it's time to let go of the thread for a while. The indigo that dyed your fingers, that sank into cotton, that rose from leaves with no clocks to guide it, tits still with you. In every slow breath, in every stretch of silence, feel your limbs grow heavier, your thoughts fewer and softer. Like cloth soaking longer in the vat, your mind is dipping deeper into rest. Outside, the night continues its quiet spinning. Somewhere a fire has been banked, a dye pot cooled. A song hummed quietly by someone you may never meet but who still knows how to fold the world in blue. You don't have to remember everything. The rhythm is already in you. So breathe in. Let that indigo air fill your lungs. Hold and exhale slowly. Again, one more breath and fade. Sleep well, dream deeply, and may tomorrow arrive on quiet footsteps.